In Berlin, Germany, Ray Zorson was a boy born with 3 genetic mutations. One made him grow 8'9" in height and 750 pounds in muscle, and the other made him 10 times stronger, more durable, and one that made his bones 6 times denser than the average human being. 3 years after he was born, his mother died of lung cancer and his father died a year later due to a broken heart. Ray was forced to live with his uncle and his family. His uncle would always beat him whether his uncle was drunk or not. His cousins would always gang up on him and blame him for every problem that went on in the house. His aunt would try to support him, but she was slowly drifting against him too. Ray was big and strong, but too afraid to fight back. Then he started being bullied at school again. The teachers only watched as the other students ganged up and beat on him. Because of this, and was forced to be homeschooled. He never got to play with other kids and never played with toys. His aunt was curious about this, so she had him tested. When she found out he was autistic and tried his best to hide it when he was out and about, which barely happened because of how different he was. When people found out, however, he was bullied even more. Because of this, Ray's family decided to move to America. Ray got settled in at his new home. Ray went to school and had a great time. No one made fun of him, no one threatened him. He was safe, at least until he met Richie and his friends. They were a group of big kids. Really big kids. Not nearly as big as Ray, but still most of them were around 6'5", 250 pounds, and the others were 6'7", 300 pounds. Turns out they took bodybuilding classes very seriously. Ray was never the violent type of kid, but when he needed to, he would defend himself. One night Ray was on the internet. He was going through the deep web for no reason other than discovering new things. Then he came across the local killers. They were known as Jeff the Killer, Jane the Killer, Nina the Killer, and Homicidal Lou. Ray wanted to know more about these killers, but he was concerned about his mental health. So he blew it off. He never got them off of his mind, however. Every day that passed, he would look at his computer and wonder more and more about the local killers. One day Ray went out in public alone without telling his aunt. His uncle and cousins didn't care at all. Ray walked to the park as a little time to himself in fresh air. When Ray arrived at the park, he felt as though something bad was gonna happen, but he never really listened to his own feelings. A dog was barking at him and Ray turned his attention to it. He suddenly realized whose dog it was, because the owner was right there with it. "Well, look who it is. Long time no see, weirdo," Richie said. Richie walked over to Ray with his dog still barking. "You look like you're having a nice time. Care for me to join in?" "Go away, Richie. I'm not in the mood for this," Ray complained. "What did you just say?" Richie said, his smirk turning into a frown. Richie walked closer until his face was a mere 6 inches away from Ray's. Ray wasn't looking for a fight, but he could tell that was all Richie wanted to do. "Look, punk, I run this town whether you like it or not. Your German ass can't do anything about it. I will smack you like a pro in front of the whole town if you ever talk to me like that again," Richie threatened as he shoved Ray. Suddenly Ray felt something he had never felt before. Something he could only describe as a red firing sensation to push back, and he did. Ray shoved Richie so hard he fell instantly. This angered his dog so much his dog went to bite Ray on the leg. Ray noticed, and everything suddenly was like time slowed down. Ray found himself clenching the dog's throat in his massive hands, nearly choking it to death. "Let him go, you bastard." Ray looked up to see Richie still on the ground, watching in shock as Ray choked his dog. Ray released the hound and noticed his surroundings. People were staring in shock, and it was all at him. Ray took off back to his house, terrified at what he had done. When he arrived at the house, he slammed the door behind him and bolted upstairs. He never did anything like he had just done. The next day, Ray was still terrified. He didn't want to go outside. He didn't want to be recognized. He turned on the TV to try and relax. He flipped to the news channel to get his mind off of anything that had to do with the day before. Ray's heart suddenly sank. His face was on the news. The incident was all over the news. "Ray." His aunt called from the other room. She came storming in and stared Ray right in the eyes. Her face was filled with shock and anger. "Care to explain why your face is all over the news and why the reporter is saying you attacked an innocent boy and nearly killed his dog?" his aunt asked. "He attacked me," Ray tried to reason. "I told you he was nothing but trouble." Ray turned to see his uncle glaring at him. "He is a big disgrace to the family," his uncle snapped. Ray had that feeling again and didn't even realize he was walking closer and closer to his uncle. "What are you minus?" His uncle was cut off by Ray's massive hand, grabbing his shirt. "Let go of me, you motherfucker," his uncle shouted. Ray let him go, not taking his eyes off of his uncle. Suddenly a knock was heard at the door. One of Ray's cousins, Rena, opened the door. Ray was terrified at who he saw. It was the police. Ray's aunt walked over and greeted them, but when they saw Ray, they paid no attention. "Ray Zorson, you're under arrest," one of them said. Ray knew what this was about, and he didn't try to reason this time, he just went with it. Ray's aunt paid the charges to get him out of the cell he was locked in for the night. He didn't feel any joy walking out of the police station. He knew he was just trying to defend himself. On the drive home, his aunt said nothing. She didn't even look at him. This was all Richie's fault. Ray knew this. Ray was pissed and couldn't shake it off. He needed to settle the score. The next day, Ray went back to the park where he knew Richie would be. He didn't care if people would stare at him. He needed to settle the score. Ray saw Richie with his friends, Mac, Brick, Hob, Nuke, and Blake talking in a group. When Richie saw him, he frowned. The others turned and frowned too. "You got a lot of nerve coming here," Richie threatened. "You have crossed the line, Rich. I can't live in the same town as you anymore," Ray said. "Well, then I guess one of us is gonna have to leave, and it sure as hell ain't gonna be me," Richie talked back. "Your parents probably wouldn't mind." He just talked about Ray's dead parents. Ray couldn't take it anymore. He punched Richie in the face, leading to the others starting to attacking him. Ray shoved them all off and looked at them. He didn't want this. He wanted them gone. Ray grabbed the Hob and threw him into a tree, breaking his back. Brick then out of nowhere struck Ray with a pocket knife, leaving a large scar on his face, but the adrenaline coursing through Ray's veins allowed Ray to ignore the pain. Ray grabbed the brick and threw him into the lake. The rest of them ran off. Ray went after them. Ray felt something he never felt before, the feeling of bloodlust. He wanted them to feel pain. He caught up to them and grabbed Mac. Nuke and Blake tried to force him off, but he was too strong. Ray shoved them all away and broke the arm of the one he caught. He yelled in pain and was thrown to the ground. Then Ray felt something hit his head. He turned to see a police officer, holding a club with his eyes wide open. The officer must have seen what was going on and rushed to the aid of Richie's friends. It reminded Ray of how no matter what the incident, if it involved him, no one would take his side. It reminded him of when they arrested him all because he had enough of Richie's shit. Ray felt even more enraged. He grabbed the officer by the shirt and kneed him in the stomach. Ray wanted more of this feeling. He smashed the officer's skull onto the concrete, killing him instantly. Suddenly Ray snapped out of his blind rage and noticed the crowd. They saw everything. Everyone was silent. Ray, suddenly realizing what he had done, ran back to his house. He was a killer. He got to his house, but he didn't go in. He knew his uncle would be there. It didn't matter if he was drunk or not. He would beat Ray for fun. Knowing this, Ray suddenly felt something take over. A feeling even worse than what he was feeling before. He went around to their tools and tried to process what was happening. He looked around at all the tools in the shed, then his eyes landed on his uncle's axe. He used to cut trees back in Germany. Ray felt different. He remembered his cousins blaming every fault on him every time his uncle beat him. And the worst of all, he remembered the look on his aunt's face when she picked him up from the police station. A look of disgust and betrayal. She was the only one Ray could ever count on. Now Ray felt like he was on his own. He suddenly snapped and grabbed his uncle's axe. He went inside and stared at his uncle who was sitting in his chair watching TV. He walked over to the TV and pressed the power button and turned it off. Ray walked over to him and stood there. His uncle was furious about what Ray just did. "The hell do you want?" his uncle asked. "You never cared about me," Ray mumbled. "Your kids never cared about me. The world never cared about me. And now, your wife doesn't care about me." "Ray, what are you doing?" his uncle nervously muttered. Ray swung the axe, his uncle barely avoiding it. He tried to run out of the room, but Ray caught him by the throat and shoved him against the wall. He tried to force Ray off, but Ray was just too strong. Ray started choking him, gripping his neck even tighter. The chair side table with a lamp was not too far. His uncle reached for the lamp and grabbed it just before his last breath and smashed it over Ray's head. Ray stumbled and threw his uncle across the room. His uncle got up and into fighting position and threw a sharp punch at Ray's face. It forced Ray's head to turn to the side, but he was unfazed. Ray slowly turned his head back to face his uncle. Eyes widened with shock and fear, he turned and ran for the door. Ray lifted the axe, readied his aim, and threw it. The axe flew so quick that when his uncle noticed it, he was too late. The axe slammed into his back, sending him to the floor. He screamed in agony. Ray slowly walked over to his uncle and put his foot on him. Grabbing the axe, he yanked it out of his uncle, causing him to let out another scream. Ray stared down at his uncle, who was losing a lot of blood. The pain his uncle was feeling at the moment was just as bad, if not worse, than the pain he made Ray feel. Ray decided that it was time to end his uncle's suffering. Ray lifted the axe up and with a lot of force brought it down on his uncle's head, killing him within an instant. Ray heard a scream and turned to see his aunt, standing there with a look of horror on her face. "Ray, what's going on with you? Why did you do that?" she asked. The sound of sirens could be heard in the distance. Ray knew he couldn't stay, so he said one final word to his aunt. "Goodbye." He ran past his aunt and out the back door and into the woods that stayed behind their backyard. 7 days later, a search party was sent to find Ray. He was a wanted man now. There was no going back. Ray was still processing what had happened. He killed someone. First a cop, now his uncle. Now he is here with just an axe. He hid in a strange abandoned warehouse deep in the woods. He hunted and killed animals to survive. One day he was exploring the warehouse. He found a strange iron mask. It was dark and dirty and had no special features except for eye holes, a nose hole. He put the mask on and stared at himself in the broken mirror on the wall. He liked it. Ray started to wear the mask wherever he went. He thought it would be nice to hide that hideous scar, not that the mask was even more disturbing. A month later, Ray had gone back to town for an unknown reason. He stayed hidden so no one would suspect he's there. Everyone was talking about him. He knew there was no going back now. Ray learned that there was evil in this world, and all those who do evil must die. It's either kill or be killed. This is who he was now, a genocidal maniac, a madman driven by his own ambition and determination to help cure the world of its corruption. 10 weeks later, Lancy was watching the news. She hoped that Ray was okay. He was very troubled, but she still cared about him. She was about to change the channel until she saw the most shocking news she had ever seen. Ray was on TV. He was found dead by the edge of the forest. Lancy fell on the floor in tears. She first lost her sister, then her brother-in-law, then her husband, and now her nephew. The news reporter said that Ray's body was currently being transported across the state in a white van. Lancy was so heartbroken and shocked that she could barely breathe. 2 days later, Lancy was watching the news again. She was so depressed that she couldn't get up or change the channel. Her children tried to help her out, but she just gave up. Then she saw it. The van that Ray's body was in was on TV. It was all destroyed. The doors were torn off, the windows were smashed, and the 2 men who were transporting the body were found dead in the van. Ray's body, however, was nowhere in sight. 3 days later, Lancy was watching the news, begging for an update on Ray's body. She watched for hours until an update came. However, it wasn't what she expected. People were reporting strange sightings of a tall, hulking figure with an axe in the woods. They say he killed a whole group of 10 people, only one lived to tell about it. Lency was feeling sick in her stomach. They said that no matter where they ran, it was like he was everywhere at once, like a ghost. There was even a footage caught by the survivor. The footage showed the large figure killing the teenagers. The figure looked exactly like Ray. Lency wanted to believe it was just a fake, an imposter or something. But deep down inside, she knew it was really him. The rumors spread like wildfire. People said that Ray might not have died in the first place. But one person, a priest, said otherwise. Lency got in contact with the priest and got an explanation. Sometimes those with a burning desire of anger and hatred can get stuck in this world, even after death. She thought maybe Ray became a zombie or something, but the priest told her he was no living corpse. He was something even worse. A ghost. He told her that judging by the fact that Ray had a physical form and could do physical things, he was a poltergeist. Why this happened was unknown. Lency was then contacted by the man who ordered those two men to escort Ray's body and told her something she was least expecting. He knew that one of the men that was escorting Ray's body was accused of being a voodoo master. He even showed her a footage of that man practicing voodoo around Ray's body. She told the priest about this and he confirmed that this was most likely what brought Ray back. That wasn't all. The priest told Lency that when voodoo is used to raise souls or bodies from the dead that they get an increase in their traits. This includes strength, durability, senses, and attitude. That meant Ray was more powerful than he ever was, and he was already a giant powerhouse of a human being. Years passed and Lency grew more depressed. She was 58 years old and still had a long time to live, knowing that her sister's son, who she promised to take good and healthy care of, was now an undead mass murderer. Her kids grew up trying their best to get her back on her feet. However, she couldn't find the strength to move on, knowing that Ray was still out there killing people. Ray wouldn't stop until he feels he has done what he thinks is his job. Protect those that he feels deserve to live and kill those who don't. He knows what's in your heart. He knows what you're guilty of. He is blinded by unstable rage. His murderous personality is uncontrollable, and he doesn't plan to stop anytime soon.